Hello, it's going to be part 13 of our game making tutorial. We fixed collision stuff last time, I think, did we? I think that's what we did. But this time we should get on to menu stuff because I've done nothing on that yet, and that's just totally different to everything we've done before. So to show how we do this, I'm going to make a menu screen. I actually don't like menu screens. I don't think you should have them, but we're going to do one because it'll help me show you how to do menus. When you start up Gunpoint, you just go straight into the game, and if you want to get to the menu, you press escape. And I've never really known why games have main menus. Why does it go to that instead of just starting the game? Because if you've never played it before, obviously you want to play the game. And if you have played it before, you almost certainly want to load your last save. Anyway, that is not the rant that you came here for. Let's make a main menu, and let's create a new room for it. It's going to be our second room, so we should start naming them proper things. So instead of room 2, I'm going to call this room start, just so we remember it's the very first one. And let's just say okay to that, because we want to also remember to rename this one. We're going to call this one our game, so this is the game, and the other one's the start room. And it's worth just reminding ourselves of what our settings are here. Go with whatever you've got, but for me it's 1600 by 900 is the size of the room, and in our views tab, we are using views. Default view is it's some nonsense value that we change that in code. But the important thing is it's visible when room starts, because when you create a new room, that's not the case. So I'll say yes to that. So if we open up a start room, we'll see, I'll make this the same size. It doesn't matter, that's bigger than my screen. I think if it's too small, you get in trouble, but if it's bigger than your screen, then you're fine. We're going to be doing menu stuff, which means it doesn't really matter how big the room is as long as it's big enough to contain the screen. Well, let's make the speed 60 as well. That probably won't show because we're not going to do any fancy animations, but might as well be consistent. Then under views, we want to say enable use of views, and we want to check visible when room starts for just the default view. We don't care that those values are all wrong because we're going to change them in code. And let's do that next, because if you remember we're going to get in trouble if we put the game object in our start room. Oh, first actually, sorry, our start room, this little list here, for most lists of resources, these are called objects and sprites and sounds and rooms. The order doesn't really matter, you can drag them and put them whatever order you like. For rooms it does matter because there's, at some point we're going to tell the game, hey, go to the next room. And so for that to work in the start room, the game room needs to be the one after it. You can specifically say go to the game room, but I quite liked, this is how I did in Gunpoint, I just dragged them around and put them in that order, because it meant that if I decided that this level should come after that level, I just drag it there, and then all the code can stay the same. So I kind of like doing that. So we're putting our start room first, and we're not going to put the game object in there. Game object is a persistent thing that we want to be always running when you're playing the game, but I think the main menu is such a completely different kettle of fish that there's no point in trying to make our game object work for both situations. We could have it disable its spawning thing and disable certain other stuff, but I think we might as well just have two different objects. We should have one that's for starting up the game and running menus, and one that's for running the game itself. And on the main menu, we don't want the game itself to be running. So we won't put the game object in there. We'll create a new one called menu, preferably without the 9. And we're going to give it a create event, and we will put some code in there, but I'm not going to write it yet. I'm just going to say okay to that and close it down, and go back to our game, because you remember ages ago we did all this stuff to do with the screen size and the resolution and all this stuff. I called it screen bullshit, eloquently. I'm just going to cut all of that out of the game object, because that's no longer the thing that runs first. Now we've got a whole room before that even gets to be created. So we want to put that on the menu object. You could even create like a dedicated startup object that has only the stuff that should run when the game starts. But to be honest, this makes a certain amount of sense on the menu object to me, because the menu is screen based. So that should work now. Let's just see if our room even works. We won't be able to quit the game or do anything. Well, that's the point actually. Let's put the quit behavior on the menu object as well. Restart? I don't know, because that's restarting the game. Actually, we're not really using our restart key anymore, are we? Because we can't die. but yeah, I'm going to leave that on the game object as well, but I'm going to copy it to the menu object just so we can quit the game, because it's annoying if you can't. So I'm going to give the menu object a step event, and we'll shove that in there for now. That will not be something we keep going forwards, but I need it so that I can quit when this happens. Blank room! That's exactly what we wanted. And the window size, so for you, hopefully it's full screen. For me, I run all this, I've got this special stuff in there that makes the window smaller than it needs to be, because that's helpful for me. If I make it full screen, you can't see what I'm doing, and the screen goes black. So don't you worry about that. What we do want to do is have, let's have just the title of the game. I'm going to call the game No XP, and we'll do that in the draw. Well, we'll do it in a draw event, but not the one we've been using before. We used the draw event on the player before. We're now going to use draw GUI. GUI stands for graphical user interface, i.e. menus and stuff. And the cool thing about, well, questionably cool thing about draw GUI is that when you talk about how to explain this, if I say like x equals 100 there, instead of that being 100 pixels to the left of the edge of the room, it will always be 100 pixels to the left of the view. And even if you're zoomed in or zoomed out with the view, Draw GUI ignores all of that. It's just talking about the screen. It doesn't even know or care what's going on in the room. It will draw directly to the screen, and all of its coordinates and maths and stuff will only depend on the screen's own size. So we can forget about rooms, and we can forget about the actual kind of world geometry and whatever's going on in the game space, and we can just deal with the screen itself. So we want to say something like, at some point we want to write draw text x, y, and that'll be our title. So that will be the thing that actually does the drawing of the text. I can't think of another way to say it. That's just what it says. It draws the text. But we actually need to do quite a lot of stuff to make it display right. For one thing, x and y, we don't even know what those are yet. In fact, did I even place the menu object? No, I didn't, so that's why. I did think the room was a bit smaller than it should have been. The view, sorry, the window. Oh god, whatever. The thing on my screen was too small. Put the menu object somewhere in your start room, doesn't matter where. And I wonder what will happen. Let's just try this. So hopefully this will make the resolution stuff work. Yeah, okay, so that's the size the window should be. And it actually did correctly draw some text in black and some unknown font wherever we happen to place the menu object. Obviously we don't want it to depend on where we place the menu object, really. We'd like that to be all positioned dynamically and in code so that it can adapt to other people's screen sizes and stuff. So let's do that. And remember, all of our coordinates here are going to be in screen terms, and the screen is called the port. If you want to talk about, if I say how wide is the port, it will return my screen resolution if I'm running it full screen. Whereas if I said how big's the view, that could be different if we were zoomed out or something. The view talks about how much of the room we can see. We don't care about that right now. We only care about screen stuff. So let's actually position ourselves. We're going to use the menu's x and y coordinates as our kind of anchor point, and we're going to want to put it in the center. So view, wait, what the fuck have I just written? It is view, isn't it? It's view H port? Yeah. Suddenly that makes no sense to me. And we're going to refer to 0. I don't know if you actually need that, but I'm sure I've had some situation where it goes badly if you don't have that. That divided by 2. So sorry, not H port, that would be for height. This is, we want width because we're talking about X at the moment, and then for Y we want the H port. So this says our X coordinate should be half of the width of the port, and our Y coordinate should be half of the height of the port. And actually let's just do that just to show that that works. By show I mean test, because I don't know what I'm doing. Hooray, it's roughly in the centre. It's not exactly in the centre, and that's because when you draw text, by default, it will draw with the x and y coordinate that you specify here. That will be the top left of the text. So let's change that. Let's make it... Sorry. No, that is alright. I keep thinking I'm wrong about this stuff, but I'm not. Draw set horizontal align, H align. And there are special words for this, and the one we want is FA center. FA middle is something different. And shall we do... I think we're going to leave... You can also change the vertical align, so it would display vertically centered. I don't know that we want to do that, do we? No, I think it gets slightly more complicated if you do that. So we're going to leave it drawing... Our y coordinate will be the top of the words that we draw, and our x coordinate will be the center of the words that we draw. And that we're going to want everything horizontally centered for sure, but vertically we'll want things to appear one after the other, because we want a title and then a series of menu options. But our title is a little bit small, so we should actually specify what kind of font we want. So right click on fonts and say create font, and we're going to say F title. For every different size and font and even bold and italics, you need to create a new font. So doing like in the middle of a sentence making a word go italic, I don't know of a way to do that, except for very complicated positioning and changing font mid-sentence. So your font has to be all bold, all italic, or neither, or both. The main thing we want is just for it to be fucking huge. So we'll make it that big. And actually Arial's not bad. What does Open Sans look like? That's a slightly more modern version of Arial. We can't really see. What if it was 64? It's pretty gross. It's all going to be gross. I'm no good with fonts. I don't know any good ones. So let's stick with that one. And that'll be our menu font. And so now before we draw our text, we set the align, the horizontal alignment of it, and we also want to set the font, so we just say draw set font F title. So drawing sprites and stuff, when we've done that before, we use a function that lets us specify everything about how it's going to be drawn. With fonts and shapes and kind of those kind of UI elements, those will be drawn with the current draw settings. So you run these commands to configure the drawing settings, and then you just draw the text, and it inherits all of the things you just set. And then if you want to draw something differently, you have to change those settings after this here, and then draw some more text after that. So we do want that font for this. We want to actually keep the center alignment that we set there, but now before we draw the next thing will be something like I'm just going to do like a subtitle thing. A game made for a tutorial. The most riveting tagline ever. But now we'll want it not to be so fucking huge, so we'll just say, I'm just going to go as like F menu, and this will be our general menu font thingy. Can I skip to Open Sans? Yes. Let's make that 64, no that's too big. 48, yeah. Maybe bold, nope. So, hopefully that exists. And then we'll change font between these. So this is going to be stuff that's, we're really just laying out what we want to appear on the screen, and we do it in this kind of, it will be, if you could see it happening, you would see it draw the title, and then it would draw the strap line, and then it will draw all these menu buttons that we're going to make. And it's doing that 60 times a second, so the draw event is executing all the time. That gets, for most of the part, you can just think of it as, oh, we're just laying out we're just designing a screen. But if you did something like, for example, if we set draw, set color white at the end of this, what would happen is, even though that's after all of this, all of it would go white, because we don't set color up here. So we set it at the end of one frame, and the next frame we're still in white mode, and so we'll draw everything in white mode unless told otherwise. So that's one thing you have to watch out for. Let's just see how... Oh no, this won't work at the moment because we're drawing this at the exact same location as this one. So we actually want... let's actually just show that. Just show the test our fonts working, and I'll show you what the problem is that we're about to solve. The problem is going to be the text is going to be drawn on top of each other. There should be... Interesting. So the NoXP is actually displaying lower, and they have the same Y value, but I think it's because NoXP is in such a massive font that the gap between its Y value and where the text actually starts is bigger, because there's just always a little bit of a gap. So obviously we want the next thing we draw after NoXP to be moved down. We want it to be Y plus some value, and that value we want it to be the height of NoXP in the current font. And we can do that. Let's actually create a new variable, because we don't want to change our Y, because then we'd be moving down all the time and we'd slip off the screen, and next frame, you know. Actually, next frame I guess we get set back. There's some reason we shouldn't do it with Y. It just feels bad to me. So I'm going to make a variable called current Y. I think it's because I don't know. Doesn't matter. We're going to do that, and then all of our Y values will be that. So Y is going to be a thing that changes between the stuff that we draw, because each time we draw something we want to move down a bit before we draw the next thing. So here we will say current Y equals current Y plus string height NoXP. And that will work. String height means the height of this bit of text drawn with the current settings, i.e. that massive font and being centered and all that stuff. Let's just demonstrate that this works, because it surely will. Yeah, so it's pretty low down now. We should address that. We're going to run out of space pretty sharpish. In fact, why are we even starting in the middle of the screen? Let's start at the top of the screen. Y is going to equal 0. So the only thing that's like a little bit inelegant about this is that if I later change the name of the game, which okay, I'm not going to do that often, but I've got to change it in 2 different places, and we don't like that, do we? That is a thing we like to avoid wherever possible. So let's make a script for it. This is a very different kind of script to all the other stuff. This is all kind of gameplay logic. So let's actually create a new script folder, or group. Under scripts, just click anywhere and say insert group, and then we'll call this one menus, and that creates a folder for us to put new scripts into. So I'm going to right click on the folder and say create script, and we're just going to make our own draw text script basically. It's going to draw the text and then it's going to add to our current Y. So let's say we could say draw text and update current Y. Yeah, let's say that. It's ridiculously verbose, but we'll do it. I found out recently where if you drag a window to the edge of the screen, it splits it in half like this, which is really nice. So we want it to do basically this, but we want to take an argument, because whatever we submit to this, we want to reuse it in 2 different places. So we're going to say text to draw equals argument. Oh my god, typing is difficult on this. Argument 0. Actually, as I said that, I realised typing isn't that difficult on this. It's not going as slowly as it used to. It's just the keyboard is a weird one. I use like a ergonomic one normally, and this is just a cheapo regular one. So keys are closer together than I think they're going to be. So argument 0 means... in fact, this is quite a nice way to show it, because I can call the function while I'm still writing it. So we will take that NoXP, and that will be our argument 0. The first thing it finds in the brackets comes through as argument 0, and we want to save that as text to draw. And now everywhere that we previously mentioned the text, we're going to say that instead. So draw the text at the current X value and the current Y value. Use whatever text we've been given, then increase the current Y by the height of what we just drew. And in fact, I think I might also define a margin that we will add every time we space things, just to make sure they're not actually touching each other. So it'll draw the text, then after it's drawn it, it will increase our kind of running Y value by the height of the text and the margin. And so now, that will take into account whatever font settings we're currently using, so we can use it for both these things. The fact that we're updating the Y value here won't really make a difference because we're not drawing anything after that. But this is already looks a lot neater, doesn't it? On the kind of the lowest level, hey look, that's nice. On the lowest level, user interface stuff is really just sort of laborious. You just have to specify every little thing about where every little thing is being placed and just say oh, after we've written that, don't draw on top of it, obviously move down by however much we should be moving down by. So it's very manual and very arduous, and so it's really good to be writing scripts that do all the basic stuff for you. And you'll often find there's a lot of common things you want to keep redoing, and there's sometimes a general version of it and a more specific version of it that you want to do. So you can kind of nest scripts within scripts to do stuff like that. So we've got a good way of drawing text. I think our menu font is probably a bit big. Next thing we want to do is a button. So we will have a button for start game, and we can also have a button for quit. And we might want to space these out, so even though this script that we've written is automatically managing our current Y, we can also add to it ourselves. So we might just want to say current Y equals current Y plus 50, just to put in a little bit of a gap, and check that that has laid out the way we expect it to. This will probably show that we should be having a smaller font. Actually, no, that's pretty good. Let's leave it like that. So we want to be able to click on these words and have something happen, and it's good to draw a box around them to do that, because then they'll look like buttons, so the user knows that they can click on them. And also it clearly defines where you can click and where you can't click, which clicks will count as being on that button, which can be important. If it's close to something else, it could be ambiguous where if I click there, which button is it going to click. And also we can make them be highlighted when you move the cursor over them. So basically we're going to make buttons. And buttons are just text with a rectangle behind it that is in some way sensitive to where the mouse cursor is. So what we want to do is, I think we actually need a new script for this. I'm trying to think whether we'll nest this text script within it. We might do. So what we want to happen is, at some point we'll be writing draw rectangle, and we'll want to figure out you have to specify 4 points, the 4 corners of the rectangle, and it goes left, top, right, bottom, and then the last thing is whether you want it to be an outline or actually filled in rectangle. We want it to be a filled in rectangle, so we say false. So that is what we want to happen, but getting those values depends on the length of this string. So really, we want to make this a function so that we can pass it the string. So we're going to make a script rather. We will make it I think just button. I'm just going to call it button, because this does draw the button, but it's also going to handle the functionality of the button. In fact, let's call it button pressed, because it will also tell us whether the button's been pressed. So we're going to want something like this in there, but instead of start game we will say, we'll leave that where it was, and we'll say button text equals argument 0. Let's have this parallel, and then button text will be what we want to write. So we'll be doing both these things, but we want to get a certain value from that's passed to us as an argument. So that's what on this side, that's what our code will look like. It will say button pressed start game, and in fact we'll probably say something like if button pressed start game, then go to next room. But that is not valid code. So we'll leave that as a comment for now. That's what we want this function to do. So it's got to draw the box and react if it's clicked. But drawing the box is actually the trickiest part, because what we want to do is, box top is actually the easiest one. That is just y, whatever the current y is. Box bottom then is box top plus string height of the button text. So, I mean, actually, we'll probably make it. Let's add a margin to all of these. So, box top would be that plus a margin. Wait, what? No. Let's just leave that as current y. So the top of the box is the current y, and we'll base everything off that. So what do we want the bottom of the box to be? Well, we want it to be like, have the top bit there, then a margin, then the text, then another margin, then the bottom. So that's the top. Then let's add on a margin, then we add on the text, then we add another margin. Obviously you could do that as plus margin times 2, but actually I like doing it this way because this tells us what we're adding, but also tells us why we're adding it, because we want the top plus a margin plus the text plus the margin. Kind of, it represents the visual layout. And again, readability is the thing I care about most. So that's easy for the vertical stuff. For the horizontal stuff, we'll start with our x value, but what we want to subtract from that to find the left edge is half of our width. So in fact, and then for right we want to add half the width. So let's store half the width. Half text width equals string width of the button text divided by 2. And then our box left is x minus that, and our box right is x plus that. And then we draw a rectangle. Actually, before we do that, our text is currently black, but let's make the rectangle black, and then we'll make our text white. Draw set color. Colors, you can specify like custom ones by doing make color RGB. Actually, probably HSV is more intuitive. That says make color given certain hue, saturation, and value numbers. So 0 is the red hue. I was going to tell you what some other hues are, but I don't know any off the top of my head. Actually, I do know like 30 is a kind of orangey yellow. I think like 60 is green, and like I don't know, 120 is like blue. This is stuff. The only reason I've memorized some hue values is that in Gunpoint, when we did the colors of different circuits, every sprite would have to be colored at runtime using this kind of code, and so John had done the master sprites showing me like what color they should be, and I had to remember what hue value to set things to match that. So you can specify a color like that, but you could. Should we do that? Yeah, let's do that. Let's have the rectangles be hue 0 for red, and then saturation is how vivid the color is. So not how bright it is, but how colourful it is. So 0 would be grey. Let's make it like, these range from 0 to 255, so let's make it 200, which is bright but not the most bright. And then value, the last one, is just how, that is brightness. That is how, on the scale from black to white. And we want 128 to the exact middle of the range. So we're going to make a dark red, or like a mid-red button. I don't know why. And there was something else I wanted to set. Maybe... No, I won't set the alpha yet. So then after that, after we've drawn the rectangle, we're going to change the colour back. We're going to change the colour to white. And if you just want a standard normal colour, you can use the reserved words, which are always C underscore, and then, oh look, they popped up. So that's nice. Just type C underscore, you'll see what all the standard ones are. And we want white. So I think that will actually show a button. It won't do anything yet, but that should work. So although this ultimately we do want this to return a value, right now it doesn't, so we'll just run it as it is. We'll just say button pressed start game. It reads a bit strangely right now because it's not doing what the function eventually will. But we should see start game surrounded by a box. Hey! Oh yeah, we forgot to add margins to the side, didn't we? And by we, I mean I. The text does draw a little bit high, doesn't it? There's more of a margin on the bottom than there is on the top. I don't think that's our fault. I think that's just a game maker quirk that you could manually tweak that. I don't think I care enough to do so. Wait, also we want a minus margin for that one. Yeah, so that's all good. The other thing is, now we want to check, have we clicked on the rectangle? And luckily we have the good sense to store all of its extremities as variables. So before we even draw the rectangle, we're going to say, we're going to check whether the mouse is, let's start commenting on this actually. Find the corners of our box, and now we'll say, see if the cursor is hovering over it, and we'll do that by saying if mouse X, that's wherever the mouse currently is in the horizontal axis, is greater than box left, which is the least X value, and mouse X is less than box right, and mouse Y is greater than box top, and mouse Y is less than box bottom. That says it's further right than the leftmost thing, it's further left than the rightmost thing, it's further down than the topmost thing, it's further up than the bottommost thing. See, that made it clearer, didn't it? Then we're going to say, what should we say? Selected or highlighted? I think highlighted equals true. And actually, we don't even need that. Let's not make a new variable for this. We can just say, if we are hovering over it, then we're going to draw set alpha 1. Alpha is, I've said this before, but it's how opaque things are. So 1 means it's not at all transparent, and 0 means it's totally transparent to the point that you can't even see it. And we are going to make our box background have only a half alpha value if the cursor isn't over it. So let's just check that's working. That's so that you will see that you've highlighted it, so you know your cursor is over it and it's going to do something if you click it. It's just another kind of visual way of indicating to the player that they're going to... So we don't set the alpha value anywhere else, so if it does get set to the 0.5, it never gets set back to 1 for anything. You can, to be strictly safe, you should, every time you want to draw anything at alpha 1, you should be saying draw set alpha 1 before it, but that's almost everything. It's actually much rarer that you want to draw something at less than alpha 1, so it's better to just remember that anytime you are drawing something at less than alpha 1, as soon as you've finished it, set it back to 1 so that everything else will run fine. This way we don't have to go back and edit the draw text script or go back into this and set the alpha there. We'll just assume we want to draw things at alpha 1 unless we specify otherwise, and every time we do draw it at less than 1, we'll set it back afterwards. Put things back where you left them. It is odd how the margin is so much greater in the vertical axis than the horizontal axis. I hope that's not my fault. It all seems pretty logical to me, the way we've done it. It's just one margin in each direction. So we'll leave that as is. Right, so it's highlighted now, but we want something to happen if it's clicked. And the thing, if we've been selected, if we're being highlighted, if the cursor is over us, then that bit here is where we want to check. Sorry, it's mouse check button pressed. Did they press the left mouse button? And if so, we want to do something. What do we want to do? We actually don't know, because we don't want this function to actually do the thing. We want it to just tell the rest of our code whether the thing was done. Because what we're actually going to do is do it here, right? We're going to have a little section of code that will take us to the next room, which is the game itself. And so we want this to say, if button pressed, start game, then go to the next room. And the button press function is going to show the button, decide its size, draw the background, and detect whether it's being hovered over and respond to that, and detect whether it's being clicked, and if so, tell us so that we can do something about it. and we'll be reusing this function loads, but we obviously won't do the same thing all the time. So we just want to return the value. So we're going to, right at the top, we're going to create a variable called result, and it will be false by default, and then only if this happens do we set it to true. So the only way it can become true is if we're being highlighted and the player clicked, in which case our button has been clicked, and then right at the end we'll say return result. That means whatever the value result is, usually false, but it could be true, it'll get sent back here, and this thing will evaluate to true or false, dependingly. And we won't know whether that's working unless this actually does something, so we'll say OK to that. And we want to go to the next room. Where you write this, you're in for a treat. Is it something like, oh wait, maybe there is, okay, hang on. Let's find out if there's a actual function for this. I don't mess with rooms that much. The heat signature is all one room. There's literally, not even for the menus is there another room. It's all one giant room. Yes, okay. We can just do room go to next. The way, so I was trying to, I thought it was like room go to room next, and I thought, well, that's a bit silly, but I guess I can do it that way. But then that didn't work, and so I looked it up, and room next itself takes an argument, and so you have to do room next of the current room, which is just the word room. So room go to the next room of the current room. And I was like, God, that's ridiculous. And it turns out it is ridiculous because that's not how, there's a much easier way of doing it. There's a special function for this. And as I say, the meaning of the word next in this context is defined by how you drag things around over here. So make sure you get that set up correctly. So hopefully we can click our button now. I have no sense of how long this episode has gone on for. Hooray! We're now in the game. Is this a completely different game? How have I ended up with a completely different game? That's something we'll look into next time. You should be working with your real source code. I've obviously worked with some kind of bizarro previous version of my game. Luckily, what we're doing is so unrelated to what we've done before that hopefully nothing I said will be difficult to follow. I don't know what I'm doing in a previous version of my game. But it worked. It took us to the right room. So, right now we're just writing the word quit, but let's do this as a proper button. If button pressed, quit. I believe the word is application quit. No, not that at all. Maybe it's end game. Let's look it up in the GameMaker help. Game end. Yes. Okay. I think application quit is in Unity. So that's super easy. And if that works, that would be rather neat. We've now made the process of actually creating a new button really easy. Now that we've got that script, we can just do it any way we like. Yeah, it's a bit misaligned, but we'll take it. Oh yeah, that's logical because our text script adds on the height of the text, but our button script doesn't add anything extra to that. So actually, it should really, shouldn't it? I would even say it should add plus. Sorry. Y equals current Y plus margin times 3, because we're going to be adding 2 margins and then we probably want another one on top of that. I'm determined to get this looking just right before we end this episode. Hooray! Doesn't look just right because those margins are still fucked up for some reason, but I'm pretty sure it's not my fault. So now we have a menu that works, and you can either start the game or you can quit the game. So that's it for this time.